In the hallowed halls of justice, Judge Harlan Whitfield believed he was the law in his courtroom. The truth wasn't what had actually happened. The truth was whatever he decided it was. He gazed down from his high bench at Ronan Vale, a tall, silent man in an orange jumpsuit, and saw nothing but a statistic. Another conviction to boost his re-election campaign. Another body to feed the private prison system that lined his pockets. Whitfield thought he was simply crushing a bug. He had no idea he was stepping on a landmine. He had no idea that the man standing before him wasn't a criminal, but a ghost. A high-level FBI operative sent to dismantle Whitfield's empire of corruption from the inside out. And by the time the gavel fell, it wouldn't be Ronan Vale's life that ended. It would be the judge's world that shattered. The air in courtroom 4B of the Oak Haven County Courthouse was stale, smelling of old wood polish, sweat, and impending doom. It was a suffocating atmosphere, deliberately maintained by the man sitting on the raised dais. Judge Harlan Whitfield adjusted his glasses, the light reflecting off the lenses to hide his eyes. He was a man in his 60s with silver hair meticulously combed back and a jawline that suggested a lifetime of getting his way. He tapped a manicured finger against the case file in front of him. To the public, Whitfield was a pillar of the community, a hard-on-crime conservative who kept the streets safe. To those in the know, he was the gatekeeper of the Oak Haven corruption ring. "Docket number 44902, the bailiff announced, his voice bored. "State versus Ronan Vale. Charges armed robbery, aggravated assault, and resisting arrest." Ronan Vale stood at the defense table. He was tall and powerfully built, with a face carved from granite. He wore the county-issued orange jumpsuit, which was 2 sizes too small, straining against his broad shoulders. His hands were cuffed in front of him, the metal biting into his wrists. Most men in his position looked terrified. They cried, they pleaded, or they looked at the floor in shame. Ronan Vale did none of those things. He stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on Judge Whitfield. He wasn't staring in anger. He was studying. He was analyzing the judge's micro-expressions, the slight tremor in the prosecutor's hand, the way the bailiff shifted his weight to his left foot. "Mr. Vale," Judge Whitfield said, his voice dripping with condescension, "you are facing 25 years to life. The state alleges that on a quiet night, you held up the Ellison liquor store, pistol-whipped the owner, Mr. Ellison, and fled with $2,000 in cash. Do you understand the severity of these charges?" Ronan remained silent for a beat too long. "I understand what I've been charged with, Your Honor," he said. His voice was a deep baritone, calm and controlled. It echoed slightly in the silence of the room. Judge Whitfield narrowed his eyes. He didn't like the tone. It lacked fear. "And how do you plead?" "Not guilty," Ronan said. A ripple of murmurs went through the gallery. It was a small crowd that day. Just a few retirees who watched trials for fun, a weeping mother of a different defendant, and 2 uniformed police officers sitting in the back row. Prosecutor Miranda Shaw stood up. She was young, ambitious, and entirely under Whitfield's thumb. She smoothed her skirt and addressed the bench. "Your Honor, the state requests that bail be denied. Mr. Vale is a drifter with no ties to the community. He was found with the stolen cash in his vehicle and a weapon matching the description of the one used in the assault. He is a flight risk and a danger to the public." Whitfield pretended to mull this over, pursing his lips. It was a performance. The decision had been made before Ronan even walked into the room. Ronan's court-appointed attorney, Lena Whitaker, jumped up. Lena was the only person in the room who wasn't part of the script. She was overworked, underpaid, and perpetually exhausted. But she had a fire in her belly. "Objection to the characterization, Your Honor," Lena argued, pushing her messy hair out of her face. "Mr. Vale has no prior criminal record, not even a parking ticket. The weapon found in his car was a legally registered firearm locked in a safe box in his trunk. And the cash—" "Ms. Whitaker," Whitfield cut her off, his voice sharp. "Do not try the case during the arraignment. The prosecution has presented compelling probable cause. A weapon was found. The victim has identified your client." "The victim identified him from a lineup conducted by Officer Trent Powell," Lena shot back. glaring at the burly cop standing by the prosecution table. A lineup that was highly suggestive, I might add. Officer Trent Powell smirked. He was a thick-necked man with a buzz cut, the kind of cop who enjoyed the physical aspect of the job a little too much. He was Whitfield's muscle on the street. "Enough," Whitfield barked, slamming his gavel. "I've heard enough. The defendant was caught with the proceeds of the crime. He assaulted a pillar of our local business community. Bail is denied. Mr. Vale will be remanded to the Oak Haven County Jail until trial, which I am scheduling for the coming days."
"That's only a few days away," Lena gasped. "Your Honor, that's rushing this. I haven't even received full discovery yet. This is a rush to judgment."
"This is speedy justice, Ms. Whitaker," Whitfield sneered. "I run an efficient courtroom. If you can't keep up, perhaps you should find a different line of work. Next case." As the bailiffs moved to grab Ronan's arms, Ronan didn't flinch. He looked straight at Officer Trent Powell, then at Prosecutor Miranda Shaw, and finally rested his gaze on Judge Whitfield. For a split second, a chill ran down Whitfield's spine. The look in the man's eyes wasn't the look of a victim. It was the look of a predator, watching prey. "Enjoy your time, Judge," Ronan thought, though his face remained impassive. "It's going to be your last as a free man." The bailiffs shoved him toward the side door. Ronan went willingly. He needed to be on the inside. The Oak Haven County Jail was where the secrets were kept, and Ronan Vale, special agent with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, was exactly where he wanted to be. The holding cells in the basement of the courthouse were a stark contrast to the polished wood upstairs. Here it was all concrete, steel, and the smell of unwashed bodies and industrial cleaner. Ronan sat on a metal bench, his back against the cold cinder blocks. The cell was crowded. A junkie was shivering in the corner, coming down from a high. 2 gang members were whispering near the bars. Ronan closed his eyes and replayed the events that had brought him here. Sometime earlier, the FBI had received a tip. A whistleblower from the Oak Haven clerk's office had sent a hard drive to the regional field office. The drive contained evidence of a massive cash for convictions scheme. Judge Harlan Whitfield, in collusion with Police Chief Marcus Reed and several high-ranking prosecutors, was railroading innocent minorities and poor whites into prison to keep occupancy rates high for a private prison corporation that was paying them kickbacks. But the evidence on the drive was circumstantial. They needed a smoking gun. They needed to see how the sausage was made. They needed someone to go through the system. Ronan had volunteered. He was the perfect candidate. A former Navy SEAL turned federal agent, he had the physical presence to survive prison and the mental fortitude to endure the psychological torture of a rigged trial. His cover was Ronan Vale, an itinerant mechanic moving across the country. The setup had been almost too easy. He had driven his beat-up truck into Oak Haven, stopped at a motel, and waited. He knew Officer Trent Powell patrolled that sector. He knew Powell had a quota to fill. Sure enough, on a recent night, Powell had pulled him over for a broken taillight, which Ronan had checked minutes prior and knew was working. Powell had dragged him out of the car, planted a bag of cash under the seat, and found the gun Ronan had legally stored. The liquor store robbery had happened shortly before. Powell just needed a body to pin it on. Ronan was the right size and the right color. "Hey, new guy." Ronan opened his eyes. One of the gang members, a man with a spiderweb tattoo on his neck, was looming over him. "You're the one who hit the liquor store, huh?" the guy asked. "Ellison's place." Ronan looked at him calmly. "That's what they say. Ellison pays protection to the Grim Reapers," the guy sneered. "You stepped on toes, man. Bad move." Ronan stood up slowly. He moved with a fluid grace that made the gang member take a subconscious step back. "I didn't rob the store," Ronan said simply. "But if you think I'm someone you can intimidate, you're making a bigger mistake than the judge did." The air in the cell grew tense. The gang member sized him up, looked at the width of Ronan's shoulders, and decided it wasn't worth it. He spat on the floor and walked away. An hour later, the heavy steel door buzzed open. "Vele, lawyer visit," a guard shouted. Ronan was handcuffed again and led to a small interrogation room. Lena Whitaker was there, pacing back and forth. She had files spread out over the metal table. She looked frantic.
"This is insane,"
she muttered as Ronan sat down. "I've been trying to get the security footage from the liquor store, but the tape has mysteriously gone missing. And the body cam footage from Powell is a corrupted file. They're scrubbing everything. Ronan." She looked up at him, her eyes wide with desperation. "Look, they're offering a plea deal. 5 years. With good behavior, you're out in 3. If we go to trial in the coming days, Whitfield will hammer you. He'll give you 25. He hates going to trial on losing cases, but he loves making examples of people." Ronan leaned forward. "Lena." She stopped pacing. "What?" "No plea deal."
"Ronan, you don't understand,"
she pleaded.
"This is Judge Whitfield.
He has a 98% conviction rate. The jury pool is picked from his golf buddies and people who owe him favors. You cannot win this."
"I'm not interested in winning the trial, Lena,"
Ronan said softly.
"I'm interested in the truth."
"The truth doesn't matter in Oakhaven," she snapped, slamming her hand on the table. "Survival matters. I can't save you if you don't let me." Ronan looked at this woman. She was good. She actually cared. That was rare. He decided to give her a crumb. Just enough to keep her fighting, but not enough to blow his cover. "Lena, listen to me carefully," Ronan said, lowering his voice. "Don't look for the footage of the robbery. It's gone. Powell destroyed it." "Then how do we look for the footage from the gas station across the street?" Ronan continued. "The one on the main route. It has a camera pointing at the intersection. It would have captured my truck passing by at the exact moment the robbery was taking place inside the liquor store. It proves I couldn't have been in 2 places at once." Lena blinked. "The gas station? I didn't think of that. It's private property, not city surveillance." "Exactly," Ronan said. "Powell wouldn't have jurisdiction to wipe it immediately, but you have to hurry. Most systems overwrite frequently. You have until tonight." Lena gathered her files quickly. She looked at Ronan with a newfound curiosity. "How did you know about the camera angles at the intersection?" "I noticed things," Ronan said. "Go get that footage." As Lena rushed out of the room, Ronan leaned back. Step 1 was in motion. But he wasn't just relying on Lena. He had his own insurance. Back in his cell, Ronan sat on his bunk. He reached into the collar of his jumpsuit. Sewn into the seam, undetectable by a standard pat-down, was a microtransmitter. He pressed it twice in a rhythmic pattern. Click, click. A signal was sent to a van parked nearby where 2 FBI tech agents were monitoring everything. "Intercepted audio," one agent said. "We're green." While Ronan sat in jail, the FBI was listening to Judge Whitfield. At that very moment, Judge Whitfield was in his chambers pouring a glass of expensive scotch. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "It's done," Whitfield said into the phone. "The drifter is locked up. We pinned the Ellison job on him. Your nephew is in the clear, Victor." On the other end of the line was Victor Rossi, the silent owner of the Oakhaven construction firms, and the man who really ran the town. "Good," Rossi's voice rasped. "My nephew is an idiot, but he's family. Make sure this Vale guy goes away for a long time, Harlan. I don't want him appealing and digging things up." "Don't worry," Whitfield laughed, taking a sip of his scotch. "I appointed Whitaker as his lawyer. She's competent enough to make it look legal, but she's too overwhelmed to find the holes in the case. By the time of the trial, Ronan Vale will be a memory." In the surveillance van, Agent Cole smiled and adjusted his headphones. "We got him," he whispered. "Conspiracy to obstruct justice, but we need more. We need to catch him doing it in open court." Back in the cell, Ronan stared at the ceiling. The game had begun. Whitfield thought he was the cat playing with a mouse. He didn't know the mouse was strapped with explosives. The days in jail were brutal. Ronan had to fend off more intimidation attempts, one from a guard who accidentally didn't feed him dinner. Ronan stayed calm. He meditated. He visualized the courtroom. The following morning, Lena Whitaker returned. She looked exhausted with dark circles under her eyes, but she was grinning.
"I got it,"
she whispered through the mesh of the visitation room. "I got the gas station footage. It shows your truck at the station at the exact moment the robbery was happening. The call came in just before. It's physically impossible for you to have been the one who committed the robbery." "Good," Ronan said. "I'm going to file a motion to dismiss immediately," Lena said. "No," Ronan said firmly. Lena froze. "What? Ronan, this proves your innocence. We present this to the judge and he has to let you go." "He won't," Ronan said. "If you show him that evidence now in chambers, he will find a way to suppress it. He'll say the timestamp is off. He'll say it's grainy, or worse, the evidence will disappear from the evidence locker before the trial starts." "So what do we do?" "We ambush him," Ronan said, his eyes hard as flint. "We wait until the trial. We wait until Powell is on the stand and lies under oath. We wait until the judge admits the fake evidence, and then when they think they have me buried, we drop the bomb." Lena hesitated. This was risky. It was dangerous malpractice to sit on exculpatory evidence. But looking at Ronan, she felt a strange compulsion to trust him. He didn't talk like a mechanic. He talked like a general. "Okay," Lena breathed. "We do it your way. But if this goes south, you're going to prison for life." "If this goes south," Ronan said, "prison will be the least of my worries." When the day of the trial arrived, Ronan was dressed in a cheap suit Lena had bought for him at a thrift store. It was tight in the arms. He was shackled and led into the courtroom. This time the room was fuller. The hard-on crime crowd had shown up. Judge Whitfield entered, his robes billowing, looking like a king taking his throne. He glared at Ronan with disdain. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Whitfield sat. "Court is now in session. State versus Vale. Are we ready for opening statements?" "The state is ready, Your Honor," Prosecutor Miranda Shaw chirped. "The defense is ready," Lena said, her voice shaking slightly. Ronan sat back. He watched Whitfield smile at the prosecutor, a conspiratorial smile. "Go ahead, Judge," Ronan thought. "Start the show. Dig your grave deep." The trial began not with a bang, but with the suffocating weight of inevitability. The courtroom air conditioning was broken, making the air thick and humid. The jury, 12 citizens selected mostly because they looked tired and compliant, fanned themselves with information pamphlets. Prosecutor Miranda Shaw paced in front of the jury box. She was painting a picture of terror. "Ladies and gentlemen," Shaw began, her voice trembling with practiced outrage. "Oak Haven is a peaceful town, a place where you can leave your doors unlocked. But men like Ronan Vale," she pointed a sharp, manicured finger at Ronan, "men like him come here to prey on our peace. He didn't just rob a liquor store. He pistol-whipped an innocent business owner. He laughed as he did it." Ronan sat motionless. He watched the jury. 3 of them looked at him with fear. 2 looked bored. 1, an older man in the back row, was staring at Judge Whitfield with a furrowed brow, perhaps sensing the fix was in. The state called its first witness, Mr. Ellison, the owner of the liquor store. Ellison was a small, balding man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. He shuffled to the stand, avoiding eye contact with everyone, especially the defendant. "Mr. Ellison," Shaw asked gently, "is the man who robbed you in this courtroom today?" Ellison hesitated. His eyes darted to the back of the room where a man in a dark suit sat, an associate of Victor Rossi. The message was clear. "Yes," Ellison whispered. He raised a shaking hand and pointed at Ronan. "That's him, the big guy. Are you certain?" I'm certain." Lena Whitaker stood up. "Objection. The witness sounds coerced." "Overruled," Judge Whitfield barked, slamming his gavel so hard a pen rolled off his bench. "The witness is traumatized, Ms. Whitaker. Show some respect. Continue, Ms. Shaw." Ronan leaned over to Lena. "Let him go," he whispered. "He's just a pawn. Go after the knight." The knight was Officer Trent Powell. When the prosecution called Powell to the stand, the mood in the room changed. Powell walked with a swagger. He chewed gum, which he stuck under the railing before sitting down. He smirked at the judge, a subtle acknowledgement of their shared secret. "Officer Powell," Shaw said, "tell us how you apprehended the suspect." "Well," Powell started, leaning into the microphone, "I was on patrol near the interstate. I saw a vehicle matching the description of the getaway car, a beat-up truck. I initiated a stop. The driver, Mr. Vale, was belligerent. I smelled alcohol. I asked him to step out, and that's when I saw the bag of cash under the seat and the handle of a .45 caliber pistol sticking out of the glove box.
Did the defendant say anything?
Yeah. Powell chuckled. He said, "You caught me, pig. I did it." A gasp went through the gallery. Lena Whitaker shot up. Objection, hearsay, and my client never made that statement. There is no recording of it. The officer's body cam malfunctioned. Judge Whitfield interjected smoothly, answering for the prosecution. Technological errors happen, Ms. Whitaker. The sworn testimony of a decorated officer of the law is evidence enough. Overruled. Ronan felt a cold rage simmering in his gut. It wasn't just the lies, it was the laziness of it. They didn't even try to make it believable, because they knew they were untouchable. Whitfield looked at Ronan with a look of utter boredom, checking his watch. "You think you're writing the ending, Judge?" Ronan thought. "But you just wrote your confession." As Powell finished his testimony confirming the time of the arrest and the violent struggle Ronan supposedly put up, the prosecution rested. "Your witness," Shaw said, sitting down with a smug smile. Lena Whitaker stood up. Her hands were trembling, but she grabbed the folder containing the screenshots from the gas station video. She looked at Ronan. He gave her a single, almost imperceptible nod. "Execute," his eyes said.
"Officer Powell?"
Lena began, walking to the podium. She didn't look like a high-powered attorney. She looked like a frazzled public defender. Powell underestimated her instantly. He leaned back, crossing his arms. "You stated that you pulled my client over shortly after the robbery, correct?" "That's right," Powell said. "And the robbery at the liquor store occurred just before that?" "Yeah." "And the distance between the liquor store and the spot where you arrested Mr. Vale is several miles?" "About that." "So," Lena said, feigning confusion, "Mr. Vale would have had to rob the store, flee the scene, and drive several miles in a very short time to be where you found him." "That's plausible. He was driving fast." Powell shrugged. "Officer, you also testified that you saw the gun in the glove box immediately." "Yes, but in your police report," Lena held up a piece of paper, "you stated the glove box was closed and locked, and you found the key in Mr. Vale's pocket after you handcuffed him. Which is it?" Powell blinked. He looked at Prosecutor Shaw. Shaw looked down at her notes. I misspoke in the report," Powell stammered. "It was open. It must have popped open when he hit a bump." "Interesting," Lena said. She walked back to her table and picked up a USB drive. "Now, officer, you stated that you were the only unit in the area and that you maintained visual contact with the suspect's vehicle from the moment you saw him until the arrest." "That's correct. I'm a thorough cop." "And you are absolutely certain that the man sitting here," she pointed to Ronan, "is the man you saw driving that truck at the time of the arrest?" 100%. Lena turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the defense would like to introduce Exhibit D into evidence." Judge Whitfield sighed loudly. "Ms. Whitaker, we are trying to wrap this up. What is Exhibit D?" "It is security footage, Your Honor," Lena said, her voice gaining strength. "Footage?" Whitfield narrowed his eyes. "From where?" "The liquor store footage was lost." "Not from the liquor store," Lena said. "From the gas station on the main route, several miles west of the liquor store and a distance away from where Officer Powell claims he made the arrest." Whitfield froze. The color drained slightly from his face. "Approach the bench." Lena walked up, flanked by Shaw. "Where did you get this?" Whitfield hissed, his microphone muted. "I subpoenaed it directly from the franchise owner this morning," Lena whispered. "It's time-stamped." "This is a surprise ambush," Shaw argued, looking panicked. "We haven't had time to authenticate it." "It's exculpatory evidence," Lena said firmly. "If you suppress this, Your Honor, it's a reversible error on appeal." Whitfield looked at Ronan. Ronan was just watching him. The judge realized he was in a corner. If he refused it outright with no reason, it looked too suspicious. He had to play it cool. "I will allow it," Whitfield said through gritted teeth. "But make it quick." Lena returned to the defense table and plugged the USB into the court projector. A grainy but clear video appeared on the white screen. It showed the interior of a gas station. The timestamp clearly indicated the time matching the robbery.
"Officer Powell," Lena said, "please look at the screen." In the video, a tall man matching Mr. Vale's description walked up to the counter. He bought a bottle of water and a pack of gum. He looked directly at the camera. It was Ronan Vale. "Officer Powell," Lena said, her voice ringing through the silent courtroom. "The robbery took place at a specific time. This video shows my client at a gas station several miles away at that very moment. Unless Mr. Vale can teleport, he could not have been robbing the liquor store." The jury began to whisper. The older man in the back row sat up straight, crossing his arms and glaring at the prosecution table. Powell turned red. That timestamp could be wrong. Those machines are never right." "We checked," Lena said. "It is synced to the atomic clock via satellite. And furthermore," she clicked a button. The video advanced to show Ronan walking out to his truck. He got in and drove away from the direction of the arrest. "Officer Powell, you claimed you were following him heading in one direction at the time of arrest. This video shows him heading the opposite way shortly before. Your entire timeline is a fabrication." "Objection!" Shaw screamed, standing up. "Argumentative." "Sustained!" Judge Whitfield roared. He looked furious. The veins in his neck were bulging. The narrative was crumbling. He had to stop this. "The jury will disregard the video evidence," Whitfield shouted. The courtroom went dead silent. "Excuse me, Your Honor?" Lena asked, stunned. "You heard me," Whitfield yelled. "This video has not been properly authenticated by a forensic expert. For all we know, it is a deep fake AI generation. In my courtroom, we do not allow unverified digital trickery to confuse the jury. I am striking Exhibit D from the record. The jury is ordered to forget they saw it." "You can't do that," Lena cried out. "It's plain as day. You're suppressing proof of innocence." "One more word, Ms. Whitaker, and I will hold you in contempt." Whitfield pointed his gavel at her like a weapon. "Sit down." Lena stood there shaking with rage and disbelief. She looked at the jury. They looked confused, but they had their orders. Whitfield adjusted his robes. He looked at Ronan with a sneer of triumph. "I am the law," his look said. "I decide what is real." He didn't know that nearby, inside the FBI van, the recording equipment was redlining. "Did you get that?" Agent Cole asked, his voice tight. "Crystal clear," Agent Hayes replied. "Judicial misconduct, obstruction of justice, deprivation of civil rights under color of law. We have him. Should we move in?" "Not yet," Cole said. Ronan gave the signal to wait. He wants the finale. The trial resumed after a tense break. The atmosphere was poisonous. Lena Whitaker sat slumped at the table, defeated. She knew the fix was in. The judge had just erased reality. "Mr. Vale," Judge Whitfield said, looking down at the defendant. "Since the defense has no admissible evidence, we will proceed to closing arguments." "Actually, Your Honor," Ronan spoke up. The deep timbre of his voice silenced the room. He didn't stand up. He just sat there leaning back, looking entirely too comfortable for a man about to be sent to prison for 20 years. "I would like to take the stand," Ronan said. Lena grabbed his arm. "Ronan, no. They will rip you apart on cross-examination. You have a right to remain silent." "I'm done being silent," Ronan said calmly. Whitfield smiled, a predatory smile. He wanted this. He wanted to humiliate this man personally. "The defendant wishes to testify." "Very well. Swear him in." Ronan walked to the witness stand. He placed his large hand on the Bible. He swore to tell the truth. He sat down and adjusted the microphone. He looked at the jury, then at Powell, then at Shaw, and finally he locked eyes with Judge Whitfield. "Mr. Vale," Lena asked nervously, "did you rob the liquor store?" "No." "Did you resist arrest?" "No." "Then why did Officer Powell say you did?" Ronan leaned into the mic. "Because Officer Powell is on the payroll of the Rossi crime family, just like the prosecutor, just like the man sitting on that bench." Chaos erupted. "Objection!" Shaw screamed. "Order! Order!" Whitfield hammered his gavel furiously. "Mr. Vale, I will have you gagged. You will not make slanderous accusations in my court." "It's not slander if it's true," Ronan said, his voice cutting through the noise.
He didn't shout. He commanded. Harlan Whitfield, you have an offshore account in the Cayman Islands under the name Libra Holdings. Every month, a shell company owned by Victor Rossi deposits a substantial sum into that account. In exchange, you ensure that his competition gets locked up and his soldiers get walked. Judge Whitfield's face went from red to ghost white. His hand gripping the gavel began to shake uncontrollably.
Bailiff,
Whitfield shrieked, his voice cracking.
remove the defendant. Remove him immediately. Declare a mistrial. This man is insane.
2 bailiffs moved toward Ronan. Ronan stood up. He didn't take a fighting stance. He just stood to his full height, radiating an authority that made the bailiffs hesitate.
Officer Powell,
Ronan continued, turning his gaze to the corrupt cop. You tampered with the evidence locker on a recent night. You stole a significant quantity of cocaine seized from the cartel and sold it back to the streets. You used my arrest to cover a quota deficit because the chief threatened to demote you.
Shut up,
Powell yelled, reaching for his taser.
Shut him up.
I'm not done, Ronan said. He looked at the jury. This court is a farce, but the evidence isn't gone. It's already been transmitted. Transmitted? Whitfield whispered. To who? Ronan reached into his pocket. The bailiffs tensed, expecting a weapon. Instead, Ronan pulled out a simple silver badge. He clipped it onto the front of his orange jumpsuit. Special Agent Ronan Vale, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The silence that followed was heavier than the grave. FBI, Lena Whitaker whispered, her hand covering her mouth. Judge Whitfield slumped back in his chair. It was as if the strings holding him up had been cut. The doors, Ronan said, looking at the back of the room. The double mahogany doors of the courtroom burst open with a crash that shook the walls.
Federal agents, nobody move.
A team of FBI agents in tactical gear, led by Agent Cole, swarmed into the room. Their weapons were drawn, but they weren't pointed at Ronan. They were pointed at the bench. Judge Harlan Whitfield, Agent Cole shouted, marching down the center aisle. You are under arrest for racketeering, bribery, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit civil rights violations. Whitfield looked around frantically. This is a mistake. You have no jurisdiction here. I am a judge of the Superior Court.
Not anymore,
Ronan said. He stepped down from the witness stand. He didn't look like a prisoner anymore. He looked like the executioner.
Cuff him,
Ronan ordered. Officer Trent Powell tried to make a run for the side exit. 2 agents tackled him before he got 3 steps, slamming him into the prosecutor's table. Prosecutor Miranda Shaw sat in her chair, weeping, her head in her hands. Agent Cole walked up the steps to the bench. He pulled Whitfield out of his high leather chair. The judge, who had looked so imposing moments ago, now looked small and frail. He was dragged down the steps, his robes tangling around his legs. As they slapped the handcuffs on Whitfield, Ronan walked over to him. Whitfield looked up, his eyes full of terror and confusion. Who are you? Ronan leaned in close so only Whitfield could hear.
I'm the one verdict you can't overturn. Take him away,
Ronan said. The courtroom was in pandemonium. The jury was standing, mouths agape. The gallery was filming with phones. Lena Whitaker was still sitting at the defense table, staring at Ronan as if he were an alien. Ronan turned to her. He offered a small, genuine smile. You did good, Lena. You're a hell of a lawyer. I had no idea, Lena stammered. I know, Ronan said. That's why it worked. But the story wasn't over. Arresting Whitfield was just the beginning. The hard karma Ronan had promised wasn't just about prison. It was about dismantling the entire legacy Whitfield had built and facing the man who pulled Whitfield's strings, Victor Rossi. Rossi wasn't in the courtroom, and Victor Rossi didn't like loose ends. As the agents led Whitfield out, Ronan's earpiece crackled.
Vale,
Agent Hayes said urgently. We have a problem. We just intercepted a call. Victor Rossi knows. He sent a hit squad to the courthouse. They aren't coming to break Whitfield out. They're coming to silence him before he talks. Ronan looked at the glass windows of the courtroom.
Get down,
he roared. Glass exploded inward. as bullets shredded the high, arched windows of courtroom 4B. The gallery screamed, scrambling over pews, diving for the floor. The sound was deafening, the sharp crack of automatic rifles echoing off the mahogany walls.
Stay low! Stay low!
Agent Cole shouted, dragging Judge Whitfield behind the thick oak defense table. Ronan Vale didn't scramble. He moved with the precision of a machine. He flipped the heavy prosecutor's table onto its side, creating a barricade for Lena Whitaker and the terrified court reporter.
Stay here, Ronan commanded Lena. Don't move until I say.
Who are they? Lena cried, clutching her files to her chest.
Cleanup crew,
Ronan said, pulling a standard-issue Glock from the holster of a fallen agent who had been grazed by glass. Rossi doesn't want Whitfield talking to the feds. He's cutting his losses. Ronan Army crawled across the floor to where Whitfield was huddled. The judge was weeping, his expensive robes covered in dust and glass shards. He looked pathetic.
They're shooting at me,
Whitfield jabbered, his face pale. Why are they shooting at me? I'm their partner. Ronan grabbed Whitfield by the collar of his shirt, hauling him close. You were never their partner, Harlan. You were their employee, and now you're a liability. You see that? Ronan pointed to a bullet hole in the wood paneling inches from Whitfield's head. That's your severance package. Save me, Whitfield begged, clutching Ronan's arm. Please, I'll tell you everything. I have the ledgers. I have the recordings.
Keep your head down,
Ronan growled. Outside the double doors, heavy boots stomped in the hallway. The local police were confused, paralyzed by the sudden arrival of the FBI. But Rossi's hitmen, mercenaries hired from out of state, were focused.
Breach!
A voice yelled from the hallway. The double doors were kicked open. 3 men in tactical black, wearing balaclavas, stormed in. They weren't looking to arrest. They were spraying the room with suppressed fire, aiming for the judge's bench. Ronan popped up from behind the overturned table. Pop, pop, pop. 3 shots, 3 hits. The first mercenary crumpled. The second spun around, clutching his shoulder. The third dove for cover behind a pew. Cole, flank left, Ronan barked. Agent Cole, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, nodded and signaled 2 other agents. They moved in a tactical formation, suppressing the remaining gunmen. But the real threat wasn't the front door. The back. The judge's chambers. Whitfield's private entrance behind the bench. It was unsecured. Ronan vaulted over the railing, sprinting toward the raised dais where Whitfield had sat in judgment only minutes before. He hit the door to the chambers just as it opened. A massive hitman stood there raising a shotgun. Ronan didn't hesitate. He slammed his shoulder into the man's midsection, tackling him back into the plush office. The shotgun went off, blasting a hole in the ceiling. They crashed onto Whitfield's Persian rug. The hitman was strong, but Ronan was lethal. The fight was brutal and short. Ronan blocked a punch, twisted the man's wrist until it snapped, and delivered a knockout blow to the temple. Breathing hard, Ronan stood up. He looked around the judge's chambers. It was a shrine to corruption. Pictures of Whitfield on yachts, cases of rare wine, and a wall safe that was partially open. Ronan grabbed the hitman's radio. "Target secure," a voice crackled on the other end. "Is the judge down?" Ronan keyed the mic. "The judge is in custody and you're surrounded." Sirens began to wail outside. Not just Oak Haven police, but state troopers and FBI tactical reinforcements. The cavalry had arrived. Ronan walked back into the courtroom. The firefight was over. The remaining mercenaries had surrendered once they realized they were outgunned. The room was a wreck, but in the center of it all, huddled under the table, Judge Whitfield was alive. Ronan walked over and hauled him up. "It's over, Harlan," Ronan said. Whitfield looked around at the destruction, the bullet holes in his bench, the shattered seal of the state on the wall. The illusion of his power was gone.
I want to make a deal,"
Whitfield whispered, his voice trembling. "I can give you Victor Rossi. I can give you the mayor. I can give you everyone." Ronan snapped the handcuffs back onto the judge's wrists. "You're going to talk," Ronan said coldly. "But not to make a deal. You're going to talk because it's the only thing that will keep you out of general population with the men you put there." As they led Whitfield out of the ruined courthouse, the press was already swarming. Cameras flashed. For the first time in his life, Judge Whitfield wasn't walking out to applause. He was doing the perp walk, and in the crowd, Lena Whitaker stood next to Ronan.
"You saved his life," she said, shaking her head. "After everything he did to you."
"I didn't save his life," Ronan said, watching the squad car door slam shut on Whitfield. "I saved his testimony. Death is too easy for men like him. He needs to live with what he became." In the months that followed the dramatic confrontation at the Oakhaven County Courthouse, the scars on the building were nothing compared to the scars being exposed in the federal district court in the state capitol. This was not Judge Whitfield's kingdom. The federal courthouse was a monolith of glass and steel, cold and impersonal. There were no bailiffs here who owed Whitfield favors, no clerks who would lose a file for $100, and no prosecutors looking to pad their conviction rates. Here, the air smelled of floor wax and absolute unyielding accountability. The courtroom was packed. Every seat in the gallery was taken by journalists, victims of Whitfield's corrupt rulings, and the families of men falsely imprisoned. In the front row sat Ronan Vale, no longer in an orange jumpsuit. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, his FBI badge clipped discreetly to his belt. Next to him sat Lena Whitaker, the newly appointed interim district attorney for Oakhaven, who looked both exhausted and vindicated. Judge Harlan Whitfield sat at the defense table. He looked like a husk of his former self. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by a twitchy, desperate, nervous energy. He had lost weight. His hair, once perfectly coiffed, was thinning and gray. He wasn't wearing his judicial robes. He was wearing a generic, ill-fitting suit provided by his public defender. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The trial itself had been a bloodbath. Ronan and his team had been thorough. They hadn't just caught Whitfield. They had dissected him. Over several weeks, the prosecution had laid out a tapestry of corruption so dense it made the jury audibly gasp. They played the audio recordings from the bug in Whitfield's chambers. The jury heard Whitfield laughing as he sentenced a teenager to 10 years for possession of a single joint just to meet a quota. They saw the bank records of Libra Holdings, tracing the blood money from Victor Rossi's construction firms directly into Whitfield's offshore accounts. They heard testimony from the hitmen who had tried to kill him, men Whitfield had once protected. But the most damning moment came from Whitfield himself. In a desperate bid for leniency, he had turned state's evidence. He had ratted on everyone. He gave up Victor Rossi, who was currently facing a life sentence in a supermax facility. He gave up the police chief. He gave up the mayor. Whitfield had burned his entire world to the ground in the hopes that he could walk away from the ashes. Now it was time for sentencing. The presiding judge was Judge Eleanor Harper. She was a legend in the federal circuit, a woman known for her intellect and her utter lack of patience for corruption. She adjusted her glasses and looked down at Whitfield with an expression of profound disgust. "Harlan Whitfield," Judge Harper began, her voice echoing in the silent room. "Please stand." Whitfield scrambled to his feet, his hands trembling.
"Yes, Your Honor. I am standing."
"In my 30 years on the bench," Harper said, her tone conversational but deadly, "I have sentenced murderers, terrorists, and cartel leaders, but I have rarely stood in the presence of someone who disgusts me as much as you do." Whitfield flinched as if he'd been slapped. "Your Honor, I cooperated. I gave you Rossi. I helped the FBI." "You helped the FBI because you were caught," Harper corrected him sharply. "You didn't find a conscience, Mr. Whitfield. You found a calculator. You weighed your options and decided that betraying your co-conspirators was your best chance at survival. That is not remorse. That is cowardice." She opened the file in front of her. "You took an oath to uphold the Constitution. Instead, you treated it like a menu, picking and choosing who received justice based on the size of their wallet. You turned the Oakhaven court into a slaughterhouse for the poor and a playground for the rich. You personally oversaw the wrongful conviction of hundreds of individuals." She paused, letting the number hang in the air. Hundreds of lives. "The prosecution has recommended a sentence of 20 years, Harper said. Whitfield let out a breath he had been holding. 20 years. He could do 20 years with good behavior. Parole. Maybe he'd be out in 12. He could survive that. He started to nod, a flicker of hope returning to his eyes. However, Harper continued, her eyes narrowing, I am not bound by the prosecution's recommendation, and in this case I find it woefully insufficient. Whitfield's head snapped up. What? You didn't just break the law, Mr. Whitfield. You poisoned the public's trust in it. That is a wound that takes generations to heal. Judge Harper picked up her gavel. It looked heavy in her hand. For the crimes of racketeering, wire fraud, money laundering, and deprivation of rights under color of law, I hereby sentence you to 40 years in federal prison.
40!
Whitfield shrieked. I'm in my 60s. That's a death sentence. Then you better start praying for longevity, Harper said coldly. But I am not finished. The room went dead silent. Usually, federal prisoners are sent to facilities based on security levels and availability, Harper said, leaning forward. However, the Bureau of Prisons grants me discretion to recommend placement. You requested a minimum security facility, a camp, I believe you called it. Yes, Whitfield stammered. For my health. I have a heart condition. I have reviewed your request, Harper said, and I am denying it. It has come to my attention that due to the overcrowding you helped create, the federal system has leased cell blocks in state facilities to house overflow prisoners. One such facility has a dedicated wing for federal inmates. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a shark. I am remanding you to the custody of the Oak Haven Correctional Facility. The color drained from Whitfield's face so fast he looked like a corpse. His knees gave way, and he had to be held up by his attorney. No, he whispered, his voice cracking. No, you can't, Your Honor. Please, that's where they are. Who? Harper asked innocently. The gangs, the Grim Reapers, the men I sentenced. Whitfield was screaming now, tears streaming down his face. If you put me in Oak Haven, they will kill me. It's a death warrant. It is a facility that you repeatedly certified as safe and humane in your own rulings, Harper noted, consulting a document. In State v. Johnson, you ruled that the overcrowding and violence in Oak Haven were exaggerated complaints by delinquents. Surely, if it was good enough for the men you sent there, it is good enough for you. Please, Whitfield wailed, struggling against the marshals who were now gripping his arms. I'll do anything. Send me to Supermax. Send me to solitary. Don't send me back to Oak Haven. The sentence is passed, Harper said, her voice like a closing casket. Get him out of my sight. Slam. The gavel struck the wood with a finality that shook the room. Whitfield's screams echoed through the courtroom as he was dragged away, kicking and pleading. The gallery watched in stunned silence, followed by a slow, rising murmur of approval. It was the sound of balance being restored. Ronan watched the doors close on the man who had tried to bury him. He felt no joy, only a grim satisfaction. He turned to Lena. 40 years, Lena breathed. In Oak Haven, he won't last a month. He might, Ronan said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. Fear is a powerful motivator. He wanted to be the king of Oak Haven. Now he gets to live in the dungeon. Soon after, a transport bus rolled through the barbed wire gates of Oak Haven Correctional. The sky was gray and the prison yard was loud with the sounds of shouting and clanging weights. Harlan Whitfield, shackled hand and foot, shuffled off the bus. He was dressed in the same orange jumpsuit he had forced Ronan to wear. It was itchy, tight, and smelled of industrial detergent. He kept his head down, trying to make himself invisible. But in prison, nobody is invisible, especially not a celebrity. Yo, check it out! A voice shouted from the yard. Whitfield flinched. He tried to walk faster toward the processing intake. But the guards, men whose pensions Whitfield had threatened during union disputes, were in no hurry. They let him stand there, exposed.
That's him,
Another voice roared.
That's Judge Hang 'em High.
Whitfield looked up, terrified. Pressed against the chain-link fence of the yard were dozens of inmates. He recognized faces. He recognized tattoos. He saw members of the Reapers. He saw members of the cartel. He saw men he had mocked, men he had ignored, men he had framed. And then he saw him. Leaning against the fence, looking calm and dangerous, was the gang member from the holding cell, the one with the spiderweb tattoo on his neck, the one Ronan had unnerved with a single look. The man smiled, revealing a gold tooth. He pointed a finger at Whitfield, mimicking a gavel falling.
Order in the court,
the man mouthed. Whitfield began to hyperventilate. The guards finally shoved him forward.
Move it, inmate,
the guard spat.
Welcome home.
As Whitfield walked into the darkness of the cell block, the chanting started. It began low, a rhythmic thumping of fists against bars, and grew into a roar that shook the concrete walls.
Judge, judge, judge.
The heavy steel door of his cell slammed shut. Whitfield backed into the corner, curling into a ball on the thin mattress. The lights flickered. He was alone, yet surrounded by 1,000 enemies. The hard karma Ronan had promised hadn't just hit back. It had swallowed him whole. Back in town, the sun was setting over a changed Oak Haven. The boarded-up shops were reopening. The police cruisers were patrolling, not prowling. Ronan stood by his truck, the engine idling. Lena Whitaker handed him a coffee. "The mayor resigned this morning," Lena said, "and the governor is appointing a special committee to review all of Whitfield's past cases. We're going to be busy for years."
It's good work,
Ronan said. "You're the right person for it."
"I still can't believe you were FBI the whole time,"
Lena said, shaking her head with a smile.
"You know, for a while there, I really thought I was defending a mechanic."
"I am a mechanic in a way," Ronan said, opening the door to his truck. "I just fix different kinds of broken machines."
"Where to next?"
Lena asked. "Wherever the system is rigged," Ronan replied. He looked at her one last time. "Take care of this town, Lena."
"I will."
Ronan threw the truck into gear and pulled onto the main road. He didn't look back at the courthouse. He didn't look back at the prison. He just drove toward the horizon, a silent guardian, moving on to the next fight, leaving justice in his wake. And that is the story of how one corrupt judge thought he could frame a nobody, only to find out he was framing the one man who could bring his entire empire crashing down. Judge Whitfield learned the hard way that when you sell justice, eventually the bill comes due. He wanted to fill the prisons. Well, he got his wish. He became the final occupant. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes justice and brutal karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. What do you think? Did the judge deserve that sentence, or was it too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.